and he would drown you, bring you to the point of when you're succumbing to that drowning and when you're starting to convulse, and then bring you out of that water and bring you back to consciousness, resuscitate you. And what it does is it creates that almost a near-death experience to where your body is flooded with all of these hormones and all of these just byproducts of a near-death experience, a trip almost in its own sense. And when you come to consciousness, you are seeing this individual as if they are your savior. You're seeing them as if they are the one who saved your life and rescued you, and you're so grateful. You're so thankful. Whereas the previous part of you that went through that death experience has faded off and is sequestered into a different arena of the mind. And now this new personality is bonded to the abuser.
The Codega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his Codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Codega and sharing one of yours. In the 1950s, the CIA launched one of its most infamous and chilling programs, MKUltra. Its purpose was to explore mind control techniques utilizing methods such as drugs, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation to manipulate individuals. The project was carried out without the consent of its subjects, leaving them with irreversible psychological scars. In the 70s, MKUltra was exposed to the public, yet the government never officially declared it to be fully shut down. Some argue that while the program may have officially ended, the techniques and experiments could have been continued in secret. The lingering question remains, did MKUltra truly end, or did it merely evolve to something far more covert? I don't know. The lack of transparency leaves many wondering if it still operates today, which I believe it does. And we're going to talk to someone who was part of that. And it's all been hidden from the public eye. And when the truth is hidden, it's up to us who seek it to bring it to the light. And like myself, I try to bring things to the light. I'm Rai, the Codega, and tonight we're going to delve into one of the darkest chapters of modern history. While MKUltra was exposed decades ago, there are so many unanswered questions about it, such as what really happened behind those closed doors during those experiments. And as I believe, the shadows of MKUltra still linger today. Our returning guest tonight is Nathan Reynolds from episode 31. You might want to stop this one and go check that one out first, and then come on back and we can continue. Nathan is a survivor. Nathan's journey through these harrowing experiences sheds light on disturbing realities of mind control and the strength it takes to overcome such manipulation. He's the author of a book, Snatched from the Flames, One Man's Journey to Uncover the Family Secrets Buried in His Bloodstained Past. It's a memoir detailing his quest to uncover answers to his mysterious double life. And without further ado, I think we should bring Nathan on here and let's jump right into this. So Nathan, welcome back to Codega's Codex of Curiosities.
Right. It's always a joy to be here with you.
I'm glad to have you back. We had our first conversation and it was extremely heavy, extremely deep. And, for those who have heard it, it was something, I think it was a whole new chapter in possibly my show as well, whereas like there is some really, really dark stuff out there. It's not all this new age, light and rainbows and everything else. There is some darkness to it. And I've always said that, whenever as good as people are out there and as good as, God is and whatnot, there is always the balance. There is always the evil out there. And, you should never be not on guard for that because there's always something out there. And we should always, there's always this balance. There's this continual battle between the two.
There absolutely is. And in some ways, I really believe that's why some have really come to an understanding of what is the truth or been willing to entertain the idea that absolute radical intelligent evil creates an opportunity to really invest in an understanding of what is good, what is purity, what is righteousness, what is holiness. And unfortunately, I was so enamored and born into a world that forced me in between those two. One that showed me a light side, but then there was a true darkness that was hiding behind it, that was really using the light as a masquerading tool to conceal and obfuscate the radical, tangible darkness that was underneath.
The you know what? That's what I think real evil is. It's not like, and don't get me wrong. No. Like, there are demons and scary stuff out there, but I believe that it masquerades a lot, because it wants to draw you in. It wants to capture you. It's not about like, boo, I'm going to scare you. It's like, no. You know, come to the dark side. We have cookies is always a joke kind of thing as well. But I believe it's more along that line. But once you're in, then they find ways to keep you in, and they, manipulate you. They, brainwash you. They do things to keep you blackmailed within within these, terrible movements, these terrible cults, these terrible, darkness.
Well, you hit on it really well when you said that about the levers of blackmail, and so much of really the ideas and the motivations that brought about the origins of what you're describing, even with MKUltra, and what is the core driving passion? What is the thing that gives somebody the willingness to try to completely take over? And it's maybe not just their mind, their behavior modification. That's ultimately what drove a lot of this. Is you find a lot more of its origins going back before the Nazis, and on just, let's just take the scientific vein of it, because it does branch off into many different avenues. My family had a deeply religious side of behavior modification and mind control that was really yoked and joined to an old religion, this brotherhood of the snake. But then there was this much more scientific methodology approach that had the military that was involved in it, and deep black scientific programming that was involved. Those really had different branches, but ultimately, in my contention, it comes from the same tree. It comes from a dark priest class of knowledge and information that was dispensed to mankind to manipulate human behavior, to control people's thoughts, their intentions, their intellect, their ideas, what it is that makes them, to control their soul. And fundamentally, that's what much of it was really desiring to do. And on one sense, there's those that were motivated to try to create an undetectable spy, someone who could never, even under torture or interrogation, reveal information, secrets. But on the other side, there were those that saw it as a means of finding a slave that thinks they're free, cultivating that and creating and weaponizing that and profiteering off of that. And so I got moved around through many different avenues of that experience throughout my life. But early on, the form of it that was most pronounced was this deeply religious format, where there was a very strategic religious rites and rituals that were accompanying trauma-based behavior modification. And that's what was really driven up from the Knights of Columbus, and ultimately much more monastic Jesuit style approaches to destruction of self, the eradication of unique individuality and the desecration of that, so that there could be much more of the collective consciousness, a much more cohesive hive mind binding. That was what was that was a major component of the goal. And so early on, much of what that really, the formula that was utilized had this intentional scariness aspect to it, such an intentional confusion, destabilization. These were like the main tenets of what was required, was to constantly destabilize the environment, not just outside externally, but internally, that there was no safe place to get away from it. There was nowhere you could run. There was no avenue that you could take that would allow you freedom, until you ultimately succumbed to a splitting of your soul, to a dissociation, a fugue state. These were all terms that were utilized more in our modern language, but really it was this separation of yourself from the circumstances, because there's circumstances like my grandfather As a Fourth Order Knights of Columbus, and he was the main splitter of our family and of other people's children. That was his specialty, was shattering the mind and then creating these blank personalities, the intentional creation of altered personalities that then could be bonded to different handlers. So really early on, there's a lot of separation. There's an intentional separation of the child from mothers, from the ability to have concrete knowing of what love and intimacy of family really is, so that when they are traumatized, when they are broken, they will bond to another person very quickly, and they'll trust them, and they will now follow them as if it's like you would your own mother. And so his methodology for one instance was the intentional use of drowning and bringing like he would take children into this big giant bathtub that he had. There was like a step down tiled mosaic bathtub that he had, and you could fit multiple people in this thing. And he would drown you, bring you to the point of when you're succumbing to that drowning and when you're starting to convulse, and then bring you out of that water and bring you back to consciousness, resuscitate you. And what it does is it creates that almost a near-death experience to where your body is flooded with all of these hormones and all of these just byproducts of a near-death experience, a trip almost in its own sense. And when you come to consciousness, you are seeing this individual as if they are your savior. You're seeing them as if they are the one who saved your life and rescued you, and you're so grateful. You're so thankful. Whereas the previous part of you that went through that death experience has faded off and is sequestered into a different arena of the mind. And now this new personality is bonded to the abuser. And so this form of it's not always with water. Sometimes it's with strangulation. Sometimes it's with massive forms of electricity and shock. But ultimately, it's that shocking of the system. It's that resetting of the system to bring about that altered personality. And it's from there that structured hypnotic neurolinguistic programming is then deployed to condition and create a altered personality, a focused individual that is only brought to the surface with specific phrases, gestures, touches on pressure points on the body. It can be simple things like color programming, where specific colors of clothing is utilized as a means of the trigger to bring that forth. Other times it's specific rings that they will want you to come forth when they see or identify this ring that somebody is wearing, or a number sequence and those. So there's different tools that are in their play kit that are then put into this internal system that is created in the person. And that is really where handlers create black books, and it's like a literal book to control personalities. And then that is what is handed off to different individuals as handlers develop over your lifetime. So early formulation of behavior modification, of creating a trauma-based mind control is paramount, especially in families that have a generational pursuit in mind, who have been doing this as their business, as their form of, hey, we want to produce children that are going to be victims of human trafficking and child exploitation. We need them to do exactly as they're told, to be completely obedient to us. So this is the formulation that's then utilized.
Jeez, that is intense. Like, that is absolutely crazy when they're like take you to the near death, and then they become your savior. Like that is so just absolutely horrendous. That is despicable. But I can understand that. Like, oh, this person saved me, and what you're saying is this other personality is now gone. It's kind of like wiped away or tucked away, hidden somewhere else and this new one is brought forth. Now, this drowning, or like this kind of strangulation or whatnot, where they take you this close to the point of death, can this happen multiple times? Do they like reset? It's like, oh, they didn't take as well as we wanted. Let's reset it and try it again. Or is it kind of like, well, let's build a different personality. Let's do like this other version that we can activate with this ring, and this one is with this key phrase.
Well, it's not. I wouldn't say that it's kind of a rinse and repeat every time. There, because on one side they might really want to. what they'll do, there's so much of it goes into personality mapping initially. So there's a lot of psychological tests that are administered, or even like there's a Stanford Binet personality test, which is given to infants, like children, as soon as they can. They will start to map out what this personality, what this person as a whole, what are their ideals, their intentions, what is their baseline intelligence, what is it that makes them happy, sad, angry, what do they respond to, what's stimulating for them, what's scary for them. All of this is kind of building a terrain map of the individual, and it's from that map that they will then utilize. Okay, what are the things that terrorize them? What causes them in unbelievable amounts of terror, and what are the things that cause them great pleasure, great relief, great joy? So it's not always that it's this only one utilized tool. Like, for instance, they were down in a city that's called Lake Havasu City, Arizona. It's really one of the hottest cities in the entire country. And so I had this responsiveness to heat, overheating. I come from a very high mountainous cold climates, and I would overheat very quickly. And so they would take me and put me in vehicles, like in a car, and leave me out in a parking lot until I was going through hypothermia, where you're overheating, going into your heat sickness, and then heat stroking, and to where you're starting to go into convulsions. And then that would be the time when I'm brought out of that environment, brought into air conditioning or put into cold water and brought out, and that creates the split, the schism. So that personality then is specifically brought in or induced through high heat. And when that split happens in the future, this other personality that comes forward in the heat of the moment, that's the one that's then being utilized and programmed. So they would utilize all these different avenues and facets of it. Other ones that were much more ritualistic involved intentionally sexually abusing and then putting inside of a coffin or into a chamber with insects and with creepy crawly stuff to just freak you out and terrorize you. And then when they open the grave, you come out of the grave as like you're one of the resurrected ones. And so that is much more for the cult loyal side. That is much more for one that's part of rituals and rites and magical practices and incantations, and one that's trained up in that path work.
Wow, that is intense. You know, like the stuff that you've never even heard about, like that stuff I've seen on Fear Factor when they're doing these things of sticking people in these coffins and putting. That's actually interesting. You know, they're putting all these insects on people and they're taking these people to these limits as well. I wonder if some of these shows, you know, like these push you to extreme shows, are just a subtle form of reprogramming as well. Is that a possibility?
Well, it's assuredly a possibility. Now, with some of them, in a sense too, it's also for the audience as a means of behaviorally bringing out different personalities and those that would watch it later on as well, because they're going to get triggered when they watch things like this that have gone through these experiments and these experiences. It's in the back recesses of their mind, maybe not in the forefront in the conscious. Their front face personality may not remember any of this, but yet they'll get triggered and they'll get activated by seeing and witnessing others going through these things or being brought to that brink of that panic internally. And this is where you can have later on in life these horrific phobias, this agoraphobia, absolute abhorrence and hatred and dread of certain things that you don't really have any conscious understanding of why. You know, because like later on in my life, there was a side of my personality that just loved water, wanted to be in water all the time. And then other times I was so afraid of it, I couldn't even touch it. I couldn't even go in it. I didn't want to shower. I didn't want to bathe. I didn't want to be around water. And they were very distinct, very opposite sides of my personality. And that understanding of the why is hidden behind these amnesic barriers, and that's what allows that veil of secrecy to be maintained. So even when entertainment on one side is a reinforcement tool for mind control in its own unique way, because you've got not only the individuals who are the actors, the people that are the script writers, and they're part of this collective, whether that's the CIA themselves financing the film to try to reinforce specific programming that they built into sleeper cell assassins or spies that they have in their network. They'll put out in the social milieu of the entertainment field films and movies that are specifically geared towards their assets that are out there, that they'll want to go see them. They'll have a compulsion to go see it. And then when they're watching it, it's specifically reinforcing programming that's been put deep within them so that it'll either activate it and draw it out or make it go to sleep.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And I've heard about things like that. Like that was like that. Uh, it's slipping my mind, but the Mel Gibson movie where he was the conspiracy theorist and he was compulsion to go buy Catcher in the Rye, and he always bought Catcher in the Rye, and that was kind of like the one thing that was like trigger. He was his trigger, and like I know that movie was all about MKUltra as well. So speaking of the MK Ultra, like I'm guessing there's a lot of suppressed memories, but how did you go about like discovering this, like going on that path to having these discoveries of like, holy crap, that actually happened to me. This is what happened to me. Because personally, myself, I would think like those memories would be locked away, very difficult to access. Maybe was there an event or something like that that started you down this path?
Well, it was a continuity of events. On one side, in my life, my family ended up selling my black book to the United States military, and I began to get involved in a lot of military projects. And they handled things in a very different manner, where they had a much more technological formulation for it. They had a very precise methodology that utilized, fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. They utilized all kinds of tools and equipments for coding and bringing out personalities, very different than the maybe old school arcane version that I had early on in my life. But the military had an intention of bringing together a lot of these personalities. And what happened is even when I was from 17 years old on, I started having all these bleed through of memories coming at me and flooding at different times, and not knowing while I'm awake where all of these memories are coming from, why I'm having these specific kinds of reoccurring nightmares and night terrors, even day visions of all these different events happening. And I started also having minor traumatic brain injuries while I was in the United States military. And this floodgates began to get open to me at that time in my life. And when I got out of the military and transitioned out of there, one of the most important things that happened, though, was for me a relationship with the Creator, and realizing there was still a purpose for my life. There was still a destiny for my life, and having a true belief, like an actual belief, that I still had a mission to accomplish on this earth, that I wasn't wasted and ruined. I wasn't just a heap of trash to be thrown out, that I could find healing. And I actually began to believe that. And I began to be a part of a community of people that showed me love and experiences. And ultimately, when my wife was brought into my life, that she showed this continuity of love, of unconditional love, that created a habitat of safety that I had never known throughout my life. Like I said, the preeminent need is destabilization, is not actual bonding with anybody. As soon as there's real bonding, it's ripped away and it's gone. She embodied that for me in such a powerful and profound way. And even when I went through a massive personality shift into the middle of our marriage, the early years of our marriage, she still stuck with me. She stuck with me when I went from being this really happy, lovey guy, the shirtless guy running around and joyful all the time and swimming everywhere, to the super serious guy wearing body armor and Kevlar and blades and hiding blades around and strangulation cords and hunting people at night. Like, completely different man showed up in her marriage. She still had this love for me. And that is what allowed me the ability to begin seeking understanding to these memories, seeking an understanding of what is it that really happened to me? How do I go about putting back together these pieces of my life? And how do I find healing? And on one side, the most important thing that came into that was deliverance from to what I believe was a spiritual and intentional demonic component that was placed into the system that helps to reinforce so much of the spiritual amnesia, the physical amnesia that controls so much of it. And that was a lot of that came from a man named Russ Dizdar, who had a really specific ministry of dealing with families that come from these multi-generational ritual abuse, and he'd been in that field for decades. But he spoke at a conference back in Dallas, Texas, and I just went to the front and asked for prayer and fell on my face, man, just weeping, because the catalyzing event for me was my wife getting pregnant with our first child, and that was, I had to choose. Do I take my daughter and do what my father did and take her to the family and give them parental rights to her for a few weeks out of the year, so I can have the trust fund, so I can have access to the phone book and get whatever I want when I need it, type of mentality? That was the price to play in the club. That was that mutual blackmail that allows you, you're in. But in order to get in, this is what is required. And I wanted to do whatever it took to preserve her innocence. And so for me, that was the moment where I knew, staring at that pregnancy test. And I talk about that moment in the book a lot, because it was this fiery moment of decision for me, that I have to choose. Now I got to tell my wife about all this horrible, humiliating, to me, the most shameful experiences of my life. And I've got to tell her that the man she married is, and the family she's connected to, is nothing like what she thinks it is. And I didn't know whether she'd stay with me. All my life I've been told, if you talk about this, right, and then you'll be killed, you'll be tortured, everyone you love will leave you, you'll be insane, you'll end up in an insane asylum. All of these lies that got reinforced. But back in the 90s, believe me, it was a lot less popular topic. It was a lot more loony bin style approach of how people responded to this. And so, but really, there's been this change over the last 10, 15 years where it's being allowed to be discussed, and everyone that talks about it isn't being executed and hunted down. And it's finally being allowed, where all of the darkness is being revealed. It's this own revelation of the beast in its own way, where they're going to allow it to come to the surface. And so for me, those were the key catalyzing events. Was I need deliverance from this, I need healing from this, and I've got to do whatever it takes to get myself healed so I can be a father to her, and we can figure out how to get away from this cult.
That is amazing. Yeah, that's really redeeming. Like what you're doing is very humbling as well. Because you have to put yourself out to your wife and say, this was my past. You have to proclaim that. And your wife is your confidant. She is the one that stuck beside you, and that's beautiful. And you mentioned your family. Now, I do have a question to take us off in a different direction here now. Why your family? How did your family get involved in this? Like, where did that stem from? How did it start? That's a big question.
Yeah. Well, on one side of it, there's some uncertainty on my mother's side of it, where my great grandfather, or where my grandfather how he became an adept. I don't know a lot of his origin story in that regard. I know there's a lot of emigrations from Poland around World War II in that time frame. However, on the Reynolds family side of it, I know that there was a discovery that was made back in the 1800s of.
And sorry to interrupt you, Nathan.
Yeah, go ahead.
When you say adept, can you explain that a little bit, just for anyone who might not know?
This would be someone who's been initiated into the secret orders of a brotherhood. So this brotherhood of the serpent, these were people that were eaters of serpents. And I don't say that in some kind of euphemism. Like, they would literally consume and drink the blood of serpents, of snakes, and do ritual magic and conjure up spirits to try to talk to them. They believed they could call up the dragon through human infanticide, through killing of children, and to try to communicate with these dragons, these beings that would tell them the future. They believe that if you could talk to them, they could tell you the future. So that's much of what that cult centered on down there. But there was discoveries that were made in archaeology, in the excavation of some of the mounds in the Ohio River Valley, where textual books from a priest class that worshipped the fiery serpent, a plumed serpent. And I really believe this is connected to Huachiblos and kind of the mythos of Quetzalcoatl, of where a lot of that comes from. And you can go back in Aztec and Peruvian. It's got all these veins into Central and South America, but that predicated a lot of that priest class on communing with this fiery dragon. They required a form of human sacrifice as a means to bring that out, bloodletting in a lot of ways. And that began to start for them this priestly order, this divine order. And a lot of that came from grandfathers or great grandfathers predating upon the grandson. It was not a father-son perversion. It was a grandfather's, this multi-generational perversion of it. And a child would be chosen from my family. A child was chosen out of all of the children that were born, and they were brought into it and became like the secret keeper. And so this information was passed down generationally through that formulation of it. Now, there's versions of it that were told to me by family members that there is a bloodline aspect that goes back far beyond this. And on one side of it, it's hard to know that because I don't have my genealogy. I share in the book about trying to call my mom to get this heraldic genealogy that she'd spent a huge amount of money investing in to get me proofed for a claim on heraldry, that I had this divine right to rule and my family was keepers of this bloodline. She spent a lot of money and time, so when I was 13 years old after my great grandfather died, to prove that genealogy. When I called her to try to get those records back, she ended up saying she was going to send them to me, but instead that's what led to this assassination attempt on my wife and I when she was 7 months pregnant. That really started this big breakdown and war between my family and them, was me trying to get access to those genealogy of my line. So I don't have the proof of
sorry,
how far that goes.
and by you saying she was going to send it to you, you gave up your location, and by that they knew where you were. Then is that kind of
They knew
part of
how
it as well?
they knew how offline of my programming I was. They knew that I was completely off in trying to go. I was trying to go dig for evidence and trying to glean evidence out of my family and start to excavate that out. And that's aside. Once I get digging into something, like once I start really hunting down information, it's a totally different person that's not their slave. That's the hunter, and they don't ever want that guy out of the box ever, especially pointed at them. Right? That guy's only allowed to go hunt people we tell him to go do. And I had been uncontrollable in that regard for years. And so they didn't want anything to do with that. So they sent people immediately to try to hunt my wife and I down after that. That was the beginning of it.
Yeah, right. That is crazy. And when you say that they, if you don't mind me asking about this, I know it might be a sensitive topic, but when they sent someone to hunt you down, how, if you want to talk about that, how did that go about? How did that play out?
Well, this was a few months after that conference where we had gone to, and I had gone to my. Well, I'll just jump into that moment. I mean, at the time, I knew this was likely going to lead to some war. That there was no way around it. And my personal conviction was that either the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is still real and trustworthy, and we can call upon him and put our full faith and trust in him and have nothing to do with this other kingdom, this unfruitful works of darkness, that I would rely on the covenant that I had with him through his son, Jesus of Nazareth, Yeshua the Messiah. Otherwise, I believed I would die. And there was nothing else to it. I'd seen these people devour families, destroy people for a lot of my life. And I was very certain that it would take supernatural protection for me. And I believe that's the only reason that we had a chance to live. But there's still a side of me that was preparing for the fight. And I mean, up until that point, I was doing a lot of, I was wearing body armor and multiple firearms all the time. I mean, I was a walking arsenal. I was ready for this whole other level of warfare. And my wife and I went to a movie late at night. It was the last showing. And when we came out, this parking lot in Colorado we came out to was almost completely empty, a huge back empty parking lot to like a mall almost area. And there was a couple cars that were parked right up by the doors, and then our car was parked kind of farther out. And as we began to walk out of the theater, all my peace went away. Just this overwhelming sense of dread and of death and of murder. Like this to me, what are spirits that are invading the airspace, where it's like everything is funky all of a sudden, and everything feels as if there's a predatory gaze on me, as if I'm being stalked in the darkness. And my wife felt it too, and it began to feel like something is totally off here. And as we looked, this car began to angle from the absolute extremity of the parking lot, not into the lanes of traffic whatsoever, but began to just completely cut through all of the different parking spots and just come straight towards us. And as they began to come towards us, I had that telling that they're coming to kill us. I knew this is somebody who's coming to kill us. And as they came closer to us, you could see my wife and I began to move towards the front of those other cars that were ducked down there, trying to find a place we could take cover. And there was a woman and a man. The man was driving and the woman was in the passenger seat, and she pulled up a pistol in her hand and aimed that and pointed that at us and tried to fire, and nothing happened. And as she dropped the magazine, pulled it out, and went to try to clear the malfunction and fire again, and nothing happened. And as the man at this point, we were getting really close, and the man turned the vehicle and kept going straight past us. And as she was working on trying to clear this malfunction or try to get the firearm back in battery and get into action, they drove past us. And I grabbed my wife's hand and we ran towards our vehicle. We just began running towards our vehicle. And I just was praying out loud, so just asking the Father to save us, have mercy on us. And as we got to our vehicle, truck came from the other side of us. So when we got in our vehicle, we were facing this way, and a truck came from the other side of the parking lot and began to come towards us. And a guy in the back seat, or the actual truck bed itself, sat up holding a rifle. And he pointed that rifle at my wife and I. And same thing, as he went to point it at us and began to fire, nothing happened. Nothing happened. And I knew at that moment that we were being protected, and this was a moment for us to get out of there. And so we started up the vehicle, and I took off the opposite direction as the truck turned. And as we began to leave and to go at the final area of the parking lot where that first car had come from, there was a final guy that was standing in total shadows near this little bridge where this highway crosses over this parking lot. And he came running directly in front of our car. And as he turned towards us, he had a pistol in his hand as clear as day. And his eyes were so massive with fear, just terror on his face, like he was staring at something that scared him worse than anything he'd ever seen in his life. And he didn't point the pistol at us. He had it in his hand and just looked at us like this, and just with this dread, and then took off past us. And I mean, we were probably within 15, 20 yards. We were much closer as that happened. And you know what? We drove out of there, and that was for us, I really believe the Father allowed it to get that close. We've had a lot of different attempts on our life over the years. Some of them have been much closer. Some of them have been a lot scarier. And others, we have literally had nothing happen. We've had assassins come and talk to us in antique stores when we were at antique stores. People that were sent on assignment to kill my wife and I instead come up and talk to me and start breaking down in tears and talking about all of these horrible things that they've done and they're a part of, and the nightmares of addictions and just the destruction of their soul. And I see them as victims. Listen, I relate more with those people than I do with any other person I've ever met in my life. I relate more to the people that are sent to hunt and kill people than anybody else, because that's the dog I was trained to be. I know what it's like to be that man, to be a slave. That's a slave. That person has no conscious will. At the end of this operation, if it goes bad, they're going to kill themselves. That's what all these mass shooters, there's a reason they all end that way, because those are programmed individuals. That's what they're made to do. They'll kill themselves and destroy the evidence. If your spy gets captured, they kill themselves. There's your cyanide pill, son. That there's a reason that's put into them. And so I have been able in different times in my life now to be able to minister to people that were literally sent to harm my family and destroy my family instead. I've been able to share with them who I am. And I know because they see us as a family and who we are and as we are, we have been protected and delivered by some of these people that would have been our enemies in any other circumstances. And so I could talk for days, brother, about all of the different experiences of what's happened to us over the years. But to me, it's evidence of the true judge of all the earth. There is a spiritual war, and it plays out with physical people on this earth. And because of that, you can choose which side you're going to be on it. Ultimately, there is one that absolutely can protect you, and there's some that can act like they can protect you. But ultimately, it's a liar's game.
Wow. Now, do you believe that, I'm just going to go back to, do you believe that these assassins see, like, are you like pushing off so much light, so much Holy Spirit, that it is breaking through to them, that, they actually have a sense of like a moment of clarity right then, and the real person actually comes forward and is like, almost calling out for help? Is that kind of possibly what you think is happening?
I think it could be a few different things. On one side, I think there could be a blocking of, there's a hedge of protection maybe around me that blocks the demonic from accompanying the individual to come into that. Or it does cause a switch in personality, and that can be through the Holy Spirit or something else, to where that person sees me as they are. They see me as they are, as opposed to seeing me as the target and nothing else, as the empty vessel to be eliminated. And so I like the other time, I really believe they saw an angel, a guardian angel that was surrounding or protecting my wife and I at the time. And that's what that dread or that fear that was on their face. Whereas other times I believe that they literally, their personality can switch to where that murderer is gone, checks out, and I mean, this guy at the antique store was literally wearing the exact same backpack that I had. I mean, the same tools of the trade, we call it, for, a gray man, how they operate, the same knife. I mean, everything. And him and I sat there at the exact booth where in that world for underground operations, one of the places we go to get supplies from A handler that you don't interact with is called a dead drop. And antique stores are one of the main places where supplies are divvied out. And so they will have an antique booth, a literal booth in the store that they will fill up with tools of the trade that you would need for really cheap. And you can go in there and get the tools that you need. And you can also find in there, there'll be messages and target packages. And it's your dead drop. It's literally where you go in liaison. And this is one that's called the Brass Armadillo off Interstate 70 in near Golden, Colorado. And that was the place that I would go to try to get supplies. And I was going there looking for a specific dagger that I would use for the trade. And this guy was standing there in front of that dagger at the same spot that I utilized, And so on one side, it's a meeting place, but you're never supposed to interact with other assets there. And I really believe that his eyes were open to see me with my family and as an individual in a different way. And it opened up that opportunity for vulnerability to be there. And he told me one of the things that was helping him specifically to get past he was addicted to the rush. I mean, we stalk and hunt other human beings. There's nothing in this world that can quite crank your gears as the stalking of another man. Like there is nothing that's quite like that. And he got totally hooked on it and couldn't come down off of it, and always was seeking a high, and became this adrenaline junkie, and turned to drugs, into sex, into constant just stimulation, jumping out of planes. I mean, anything he could to get going. And he said he was trying to get sober and clean up his life. And he started using bee sting therapy, was the thing that helped him finally get sobriety in his life, was using bee stings to give him a rush and mimic that. And he's just started crying, telling me and explaining this to me, that he's finally trying to get some semblance of normalcy, but he keeps getting drawn back in to the trade. So there's a war for these people's souls. Just because it looks like, mind controlled trans person in hypnotic state, there's still people. It's still an individual. There's still a person there that has hopes and dreams and desires and wants, but it has been abused and used so much that they see themselves as this other thing, and it's hard for them to relate to mankind whatsoever. And so victims and survivors are some of the most brilliant and intelligent and gifted and talented people on the earth, but the shell surrounding that is a mess, is a train wreck. And that's what many people bump into, and they'd never stick around long enough to really see the true gem that's within that person.
Wow, I guess that's something we, looking at this, that's something you don't think about. Initially you're portraying, you're painting this picture of like this, like this cold killer kind of thing, but you're like, no, there is this real person that's in there. They have these hopes, they have these dreams, and it's true. We can't count that out. It's just a matter of, can they get out of that? Can they break that programming enough so that they can free that other self? That other self can take over, and shed the demons that are on them, literally, that are infesting them, and to move forward with their life, such as yourself, which is, commendable in the biggest way. It's that is a scary predicament that a lot of that it seems like that you were in, and they are in, and it's blessing that you made it out. Wow. I don't I don't know where to go from there. I'm just like, that is so intense. But well, let's go to this. So this rush of hunting humans, of hunting men, of hunting people. I don't want to go too much into that, but I know that was something that you were possibly involved with as well. What was there? I don't want to say gifts, but was there things bestowed upon you by these other interactions with these demons, or with this, almost a possession of these demons? Was there things that they could, like amplify, or is there something like that?
Quite assuredly so. The in the realm of warfare and predation, there's this desire for strength and for power, and the means to outwit and overcome and outthink your enemy. But I got introduced to death at such a very early age, And it wasn't just vicariously through videos or films, but it was very visceral. It was a very quick elevation of it was a very quick revelation that death was imminent and it could come at any time, and life was very fleeting. And I saw so many tortured and abused and traumatized, and I saw death of young ones and teenagers and adults, and I saw so much of it. By the time I was 6 years old, I was saturated in this death cult and believed the only real way to get out was to find a way to fight back. And that was the lever that got played on me for so much of the rest of my life in the cult and in this underworld, was a need for vengeance. And the vengeance that I desired so deeply was a means to stop harm from coming to another individual, that there would not be another child massacred by this pervert ever again. And that this driving just need to stop it, but then being forced over and over again to not be able to do anything but to sit back and watch. There's nothing you can do. And so is that just reinforcement of learned helplessness, until I went through this experience of a very disgusting ritual where a man was ritually crucified, and he was played out to be a pervert, a pedophile who abused children, and then was crucified. And then we were literally sat there and told to call upon death, and it had a specific name I don't use anymore, but a specific entity to call upon, that this prince of death, and he would give you power to fight your enemies. He would give you power to hunt and to kill, and he would give you the strength and be unkillable. And so that's what I did. I went into this covenant through this ritual to be with death and to be bound to this spirit so that I could have that power. And I mean, I had power come on me that's nearly indescribable. That is an overwhelming exousia, this just elongation of yourself, an articulation of your nervous system that's extending beyond corporal reality and integrating itself into an ether of an unseen realm. You were tapped into a power source that was beyond anything that's corporal, physical, cannot comprehend it. And it was an immediate thing that I could call upon and have that power to overwhelmingly devastate my enemies. So there was a physical, spiritual yoking that took place there, and that's that covenant that I that covenant is what made me believe I could never get out. I could never get saved. I could never have deliverance, because I went into that through blood, much shedding of blood. And that spirit is the one I would call upon when I wanted to go hunt, or I was finally being trained on how to do the art of silent killing and gutter fighting, and learning a lot of these techniques for how to kill people in a clandestine manner, in a covert manner, and to do so silently. That is what I got trained up in this maybe an arcane form of martial arts, not a classical dojo, not a version of martial arts like that, in one that was explicitly made to destroy and kill an individual in a very particular manner. That all got yoked together and integrated, and indeed, it's a form of spiritual hybridization of your physical abilities and augmenting your capacity. And it would come on you, and it would increase my strength. It would increase my ability to move and maneuver my physical body into space in ways that I could not normally do, moving and dancing almost in pirouettes, in like a capoeira form of it's like a ballet, a form of classical ballet, but then using precision pin striking with a needlepoint daggers onto these vital areas of the body. That became this magical dance of death that I became accustomed to and became, enraptured by. Ultimately, it was a total possession, a complete possession of my body under the influence of this other thing. And that's why when I say there is this hedge of protection that can be there, is because I experienced that at a time when I was sent after a target. And when I went to this house, as I drew near to go towards that house with that familiar spirit, with that spirit manifesting and stalking, I felt a barrier, a physical barrier like that I walked over maybe within 25, 30 yards of the door to where I could not go past it with those spirits accompanying me. And I was just in my own strength. I was just a teenager, but I did not have any of that power, that exousia wasn't on me. And I could not go into that space with my familiars with me. And that was a seed that got planted in me that began to make me question authority. Is there an actual hierarchy to the spiritual realm that I don't fully comprehend or understand? And how do I get some of that? Because to me, that's a lot more than what I've been getting over here. I am a parasite. I'm the host to this parasite, and I can't get it off of me. But somehow it got off of me when I walked over this threshold, and I don't know what's going on, but I need to know.
Interesting. And that threshold, do you believe it was like a Christ-like threshold, or like a Holy Spirit threshold, or something set up that that caused that to disengage?
I believe it's literally what is called a hedge of protection. And
Okay.
so that would be, there's a dominion that exists around your home or your
Hmm.
bedroom. It's called a threshold covenant in the scriptures, where there's a protective measure that comes along with when you walk into somebody's house. And it's lost in our Western culture by and far. It's something that's preserved a lot more in Eastern cultures. But this idea that when you cross over into someone's threshold, you're physically responsible for that person. You'll provide for them, protect them, take care of them, watch over them. And that barrier of that covenant extends to the boundaries of your property. And that's literally what I believe I crossed over, was the physical, spiritual boundary of that person's property. And they had a hedge of protection there that bound any demons from accompanying or coming into that property. And so that they literally had the authority and had a protective agent there, whether it was an angel specifically, I don't know. I didn't see any force field. I didn't see a wall of fire. I didn't see anything. I just crossed through it and knew suddenly I was on the other side of someone else's terrain. And that terrain excluded anything like these parasites that were accompanying me.
That is really fascinating. It kind of takes us into the, carrying your wife over the threshold into your house. It's kind of like you inviting her in. You're taking her over that and allowing her entrance into that. And then it also takes us into like like vampires. We're going to talk vampires here, where they're not allowed in, unless you welcome them in. And it's kind of, it falls in line with that. That I'm not sure if that's a Hollywood thing, or if it is actually like a kind of a thing that is associated with vampires, where they're not allowed in unless you welcome them in.
Well, much of it's not, I wouldn't say it's built necessarily on Hollywood. Hollywood may have ran with it in its own entertaining version of it, but what they're this entire system, all of creation is built on terms of legal authority, rights and rules. There's laws, Torah, that governs it, instructions that literally set this entire thing up. There's a spiritual hierarchy that governs that, and an aspect of that is consent. Is consent. We have contained within us this powerful gift of free will. We have the right to choose. We are given a choice. Now, that does not mean that you can't have manufactured consent. It doesn't mean you can't be tricked and beguiled and deceived and subterfuge and agree to terms and contracts, fine print stuff that you didn't necessarily understand came as a package deal. But there's in the hierarchy of the spiritual kingdom of darkness, that much of what they operate on is people's ignorance of the fine print of the details to the contract. And so people will consent to allowing this relationship to build with a demon, if you want to call it that, or with these other spiritual entities that feed on the negative side of things. They feed on the fear, the guilt, the shame, the embarrassment, the calamity. That requires a legal grounds for them to abide. They need to have legal right to be there, and you can expel them when that agreement of that consent is renounced. That's the power of renouncing those agreements. Renouncing or repenting is another way, turning away from the agreement that you once had with them. I mean, and it can play out simply when children are sitting around and they dabble with a Ouija board. They dabble with communing with the dead or engaging in necromancy and experimenting with some of this stuff. Listen, when you seek it out, this stuff will respond, and it will masquerade as to many different forms. It could manifest in all kinds of different methodologies based off that human terrain map, based off of what it thinks you'll like or want the most. And then when you want that free, if no one's ever given you the means of understanding a hierarchy and authority to command it, to expel it out of you, you're stuck with this stuff. And this is what a lot of people are trapped with. They have these negative spiritual parasites clinging to them and predating upon them. But much of the ethos, more specific to the vampirism of it, is a different type of entity, in my opinion, a much older archon, and this goes back to the Grigori and the Watchers and those that specifically consumed the blood of individuals as a food source. And that it augments mankind. It augments people physically at a very baseline level. It changes the way their liver functions. It changes how their kidneys function. When you consume blood as a source of meat, as a source of sustenance, it will physically begin to make alterations in your anatomy. And when you have people who have been practicing that long term, it is like a parasite. It is like a parasite that gets transferred from one host to another. And this thing, it literally helps to change the mitochondria in that individual to metabolize blood more readily and more efficiently. And I don't say this from without personal experience, because this is what much of the rituals involved was the consumption of blood. And there were those that, while consuming, would alter their physical appearance, would change. They would become flushed. Their skin would palpate. They would have this filling up of their collagen, like their skin tightening, and the reversal of age. Like, they would alter in front of my face. Whereas other people drink blood, they puke, they get sick, they get ill. There's these other kinds of people that have been augmented, in my opinion, by this practice for so long that they are literally fed and sustained by it. And that's why this idea of vampires has been around for so long, because it's a real, actual reality. People can go and participate in this now, because this once black arcane knowledge has been de-occulted, has been brought to the surface and revealed. There's people that are experimenting with this, not understanding. There's old religious orders that have been practicing the rites of blood drinking all the way back to the fallen ones, from the sons of Nimrod all the way back to the Azazel and Gadriel and some of these other fallen watchers.
Wow, it's terrifying, but also I will say it's interesting as well. Like you hear a lot of like these, and I did bring up Hollywood earlier on, and you see a lot of these celebrities, and there is rumors abound about them drinking or utilizing some sort of age defying medicine or rituals or something like that, and of course consuming blood is or blood transfusions is one of them. There I I totally believe that is happening. Like it's and like you said, these things I think are coming more and more to light. But it's like they're trying to pervert them and try to say, "Oh no, they're well." I guess not pervert them, but maybe to make them look like it's a great thing, it's a good thing. Oh yeah, we're doing this, and take it away. Try moving it away from the occult practices, even though it's still tied to it, even though it's an occult practice. Move it away and get more people involved with it, thinking that this is a new way, new way of thinking. This is the way we want to do it, but it's not evil, but in all sense and purposes as it is.
I think you're hitting on the idea of rebranding.
Yes.
As really
Yes.
ultimately what they're doing is they're trying to appeal to a greater market audience. It's the same. It's like Coca-Cola's driving policy is to get as many ounces of their beverages in the stomachs of consumers. That's it. Every single day. That's it. That's their driving endeavor. Well, there's a totally different vein of people who their entire endeavor in life is to get as much of this into the masses of the stomachs of mankind as possible. Because when there's the consumption of blood like that, that's the gateway. That's that consent to eating the life of another individual that gives them legal rights for these spiritual parasites to accompany it, that gives them grounds to do that. But if you maybe remove the demystification of it, that you de-occult it and you try to bring it to the scientific methodology, you've got billionaires walking around saying I'm on this quest to reverse aging. And part of that practice is taking the blood of the older fathers and giving it down to the sons, and the sons' blood going up into the fathers as a means of a medical way of boosting my white blood cell count, or they're taking the scientific route. And many people in our society are conditioned to trust the scientists, the white robe priest class of our modern society, that they have cutting edge formulations to give us life. These are still the same old religions of promising us the cup of immortality that we drink from it. These are the same. I mean, these the grail ethos that have been going back a long time, but now it's just rebranded into a different form that's much more palatable to our time and age and to the type of culture that we have here in Western civilization, and is very effective marketing. Because on the fine print of the pharmaceutical bottle, it doesn't tell you that it's derived from, that it contains human blood. They know it's a really unpopular topic, but over 70% of all of the blood that's donated at the blood banks here in North America is sold to pharmaceutical companies. It's not given back as the blood bank, then it's given to people who are sick and dying. It's taken and given to pharmaceutical companies to put into drugs. It's used for the formulation and as an ingredient, and the plasmids and these other derivatives that come out of it are utilized in medicines that people are buying and getting prescriptions for and are consuming it unknowingly, by and far for the vast majority, but are now consuming the blood of other people in the forms of their medications as a regimen every single day. Every day they're on a medication. They said, the doctor says they're going to be on this the rest of my life. They don't understand. They're staving off death through the consumption of blood, but it's just packaged in a white powder. But my family down there in Lake Havasu, they had a factory, a literal factory where children were sitting in chairs, strapped into chairs, being shown traumatizing videos, and then being piped, where they were drawing the blood out of them as they were going through different circadian rhythms, whether they were, their body was going through different shock experiences, some pleasure, some pain. And there was literal compounds in the blood that were then being synthesized out of it and sold in little vials. That was a package that they were producing there in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. That was a non-pharmaceutical method, but one that at the end of the day, the end user who is taking those substances, like people that were in the Church of Latter-day Christ or Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they were taking those during their rituals in the temple at Snowflake City, Arizona. This was like part of their practices, was consuming these things that came from children being tortured. But we've got it happening in the mainstream. It's just not, they're just not informing us. They're not giving us proper informed consent about the matter.
That's an abomination, that is absolutely horrendous, and of course, like I would say 4 or 5 years ago, there was a lot of, people talking about adrenochrome, which is pretty much kind of what you're talking about. You get these children all scared, and then you're taking their blood, but this seems to be, it's like a blood bank is what they're doing. And that is great. And when you mentioned billionaires earlier too, because that's where I heard it from. There was a billionaire who was taking the blood from his son and injecting it into himself, like transfusing the blood or the blood transfusion to himself, and like that is what is happening, and it's rebranding. That's exactly what it is, and I did not know about the drugs using like the plasma from the blood and whatnot, or using the blood per se to make these drugs. It's not like I'm using pharmaceutical drugs at all anymore. But I hear a lot of people, I have some friends, and they wear it like a badge of honor of taking these drugs. Oh yeah, I'm on this one, and they know the names of them too. And I'm like, but how is this a medication anymore? Like, how are you? It's not a treatment anymore. Like, a treatment is to cure yourself and be off of this. That's not what the pharmaceuticals are doing now these days, and that's a whole other bag of worms. Which I'm totally. I don't want to get into.
I get it.
I'll get flagged by
I know
by
the
YouTube
battle.
for sure for mentioning that. We can talk about just about anything, but as soon as you start mentioning that aspect of it, you get kicked off. But yeah, there is things in injections, we'll say, that when you're talking blood, we'll talk like aborted fetus cells that are being used as well. It like that's a whole other industry, which I'm not going to touch right now. If I'm only on Rumble, then I'll jump into it. But with this being on YouTube and whatnot, I just want people to know that that's a business. That side, it's a disgusting evil, dark business, but that is a business, and something for someone to look into is that specifically is it's not about helping the woman. There is something that they're taking out, and it's being repurposed, and it's disgusting.
And at the end of the day, though, this is just a modernization of very much what is called drug sorcery from of old. These are, I mean, this is occult sciences. That's ultimately what this used to be called, alchemical processes. These were different cults that had these specialties that would come and make potions and elixirs, and they would beautify kings, and there's those that had the affluence, the effluence to try to acquire and utilize these types of things. This has been going on for millennia. This has been going on. This is the witch's brew, and we have an idea of some creepy old lady hag stirring a pot of all this stuff, but it's literally taking place there where you live, in the country where you live, where you start to look at the cults that are literally practicing this, that are involved in business and drug trafficking and trying to, this is the business, as having your bruja, having your own personal witch who does spells for you and incantations for you, and she's the one provide, like, this is a big business where the millionaires and the billionaires of all different levels of society are engaging in to try to get what they want from it. And this is, I my family operated in Arizona, and so there was this crossover with a lot of these ideas, and there's a blending between cults that's taking place now, and this conglomeration of people that are willing to work together to keep the secrets. But on the other side, let's trade information and show me what's in your playbook, show me what's in your ritual magic, and let's see how I can apply that and utilize some of what I'm doing. And so there's this amalgamation of all of this, what used to be forbidden knowledge, that's spreading into the forms of media and entertainment and technology. And it's this super saturation of all of these effects where we're going to call it Burning Man. And we're going to take psychedelics and be able to talk to let's call them aliens. We're going to talk to aliens. They're going to give us downloads for technological scripts that are coming in. I'm like, you guys, just because you're using drugs to get there is not much different than my family that was using a different form of drug, which was trauma and fear and ecstasy, and they were using that to talk to spirits. Okay, yours masquerade like aliens, theirs masqueraded like serpents, to try to give them downloads of information so they can make money. I mean, I don't say this from like some like idea. This is like big tech industries. Literally, this is what they go to these events to do. This is what these events are for, is to try to create this hive mind consciousness to get downloads so they can do what the Vril Society was doing back in the 1930s, to try to get technology so they could have super war weapons. I mean, this type of evolution of tapping into that spiritual realm, whether we want to call it a quantum computer that's tapping into it for us and reaching into the ether to grab confirmation of a proof of concepts for us and bring it down here. All of this has been going on for millennia. It just rebrands itself and presents itself in a different way to suit the individual's psyche, to resurrect, to me, the old gods. It's their own way of bringing about a resurrection of the old gods. That's why it's being pushed in this formulation that we're seeing today. It's because it's a very effective tool. It's been used for a long time, and it knows how to be a chameleon fundamentally and work its way back into the lives of individuals and devour their innocence.
I could not say it any better than that. That's exactly how I feel as well. It's bringing back the old gods. It's this worship of the old gods, and it's just rebranding of it, bringing it up in a different way, and so that it can be acceptable in this day and age. And it's happening, and people don't realize it. And people claim to be atheists, and they claim to not believe in this, but in fact they're worshiping these old gods, and this dedication to what they believe is this we'll say science, because I think science has gotten completely perverted as well, is a form of religion as well, and it's just taken away. It's gone in a direction that is not beneficial to us as humans, as people, as a loving, caring society. It's taken us into this different direction, and it's a scary path. It's a scary thing to look at into the future here. Where it goes, well, I don't know. All I know is I have my God, I have my Creator, and I'll hold steadfast to those beliefs, and move forward in the light, and we'll see what happens.
I love that. Absolutely.
Well, Nathan, I want to say thank you so much for coming back again. I really, uh, I think it's it's very enlightening that you're able to come here and speak about this. Um, like I had a question, like what advice would you give others who might be uncovering, their own difficult truths about their own past? What advice would you give to them?
It's it's absolutely worth it to weigh into the darkness of despair and hopelessness. It, it's worth it to fight for freedom. I would never tell somebody that they have to come out and tell everyone what's happened to them, what they've been through. But I would say that there is so much power in radical vulnerability and honesty with yourself, with somebody you trust, with a notebook and a pen, with a journal in private, that there is so much power in letting the internal aspects of who you are speak and have their voice and no longer silence them, whether it's personally or allow others to suppress and to silence that any longer. That there is such freedom waiting when you surrender to that, from that fear, from that hatred, the self-hatred, the hatred of others, that bitterness of heart, the rage, the violence. When you can surrender that and offer that up. And to me, I really believe that is to the creator who loves you and formed you and made you for a purpose that's beyond anything that anyone ever told you. That's far better, far more grand and far more marvelous, that you really are made to be one of the heroes of humanity, that you are not made to be a victim, but you are made to be an overcomer and one who lifts up the weary with a word. And I am absolutely positively convinced that the wounded, the survivors of mind control, behavior modification, abuse, and trauma, and all this dark underbelly of what's pinned up this society for so long, really have within them the greatest potential to help set other victims free, to help empower others with the understanding they need to overcome the wiles and the schemes of the wicked. That in them is really one of the greatest army that has been hiding in the shadowy corners of the overlooked and forgotten, has been wasted leftovers of society. And at the end of the day, they're the greatest and most beautiful and brilliant people I've ever known. And I invite you all to come out of the closets of pain and suffering of where you've been throughout your life and find freedom and redemption is available to you.
Awesome. Nathan, again, thank you so much. And I forgot to do this in the beginning, but can you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find you, where they can pick up your book as well?
Absolutely. They can go to snatchedfromtheflames.com. That's my website where I do have the book there. It's Name Your Own Price as well. I have an audio version, an ebook. I've got signed copies available. I also did an entire recording of the scriptures. To me, that was the place where I found my identity, my restoration of my identity. And that's available. You guys can download that. But the main place where I put up the most of my content is on YouTube. YouTube Nathan Reynolds is my channel. And I've got like 600 and something videos on there as well. I've got the audio of my book, but I've got a lot of other interviews I've done over the years and on different topics. My wife and I are also very passionate people about a variety of natural living and maybe the older way of life, a different approach to life, and homeschooling and farming and natural medicines and all those avenues of it that we've been passionate about over the years as well. So it's a really fun place, and right, I'm glad to be here with you again. It's fun to go down these avenues with you. You're a great host, and you have some great questions as well. So glad we could do this tonight.
I thoroughly appreciate that. Thank you again, Nathan, so much. All right, everyone. That was Nathan Reynolds. Make sure you go check out his website. Check out his YouTube channel. He's got some great content as well. And also, if you're doing any homeschooling, check him out, because I believe he's got some homeschooling videos in there and some great material for that. So, it was, I want to thank him. It was very deeply impactful and thought provoking. This conversation with Nathan, his courage in sharing such dark and difficult experiences, it has to remind us the importance that sometimes facing uncomfortable truths and standing in the light of resilience, like, gives you the hope. So, if Nathan's story resonated with you, and if you're someone seeking support, remember you're not alone. There's always resources and communities ready to help. Now, like I said, don't forget to check out his book as well, which was Snatched from the Flames, which is a fantastic book, very, very deep, and it'll make you question a lot. Now, as always, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you guys subscribe, share this episode with someone who might, you think might benefit from hearing it, and join us next time as we continue to explore the stories that challenge us and inspire us. So until next time, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home. I look forward to our next adventure together as we navigate the mysteries that lie ahead. Until our paths cross again, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.